Hello there, Erin from Morehouse Farm here with today's knitting tip, which is how to read your knitting. Now, when we're knitting a shawl like Lark's Alvina, which is our current knit along, co-hosted by Anne Frost of the I Thought I Knew How podcast, and you'll find it in Louisa Harding's Shawls, Wraps, and Scarves book. It is the first in a series of 3 in our Taming Lace knit along series. And one of the skills that we absolutely want to make sure we add into our toolbox is reading our knitting. And this can be as simple as counting the stitches to know what row we're on. And it can also be looking at what the stitch markers are telling us, because we want you to be brave enough to think about ditching the stitch markers. I know you're hearing that and you're saying, Erin, you live way too dangerously for me. But let's go through this video and you tell me what you think at the end. Because when you get to the middle here, right, what is this stitch marker meaning to do? It's meant to be a speed bump to slow you down and warn you that you're on the center stitch. When you're using stitch markers, the non-removable kind, these are just little plastic rings that slide on the needle, you can't change them or their position until you've knit to them and then take them off the needles. Now, there's different kinds, often called removable stitch markers, and a safety pin is a household item that is a good replica that allows you to attach it to the work wherever you want, close it up, and then remove it when you don't want it. So that's one that some people like to use. The other way I could mark my center stitch, and you've seen me do this a lot, is with a bobby pin, because I like to indicate that's the center. I need to pay attention right there, but I really dislike knitting with these markers. They always seem to be in my way, this style anyway. So what would this look like if I were to ditch the stitch markers? Yep, I'm just gonna ditch the stitches at the same time, pick them back up, not a big deal. See, they didn't go anywhere. And I'm going to continue knitting. So what do I need to look for? What I'm seeing here is that this whole way down, my center stitch is flanked by a yarn over. So now I know when I get to my center stitch, I just need to pay attention so that I can add that design element in. So here I go. Okay, I can use this stitch marker, my stationary one, as my indicator, or if I get brave about reading my knitting, don't even need that. Okay, so I'm coming up here. I see that I am right before my center stitch. I do my yarn over my center stitch, my yarn over again, and then continue in pattern, and I didn't need the markers for that. It also eliminates the problem of where my marker falls related to my yarn overs. In this case, depending on how big my yarn over is, this marker, right, might slide easily underneath my yarn over, and I end up with a different number of stitches on the outside. So if I'm relying on that marker and it slipped over, I may not have the correct count for my pattern if that's what I'm using. So if I know that I want 3 edge stitches in pattern, that would be my cue when I get to the first 3 or last 3 to knit them a certain way or purl them or whatever the case may be. So by eliminating the markers, you have a much better look at your work so that you can anticipate what to do next. And that's all part of reading your knitting. And the last thing I want to leave you with here in reading your knitting is how many rows have I worked in stockinette stitch? I think that's one of the trickiest things for us because it's hard to know what stitch is where. So if you look at the current row that I'm on, the row that's on my needles, okay, that counts as 1. And it is looped through a row below. So if we work our way back to where there was what looks like a purl row, okay, that one doesn't count because that was from the row below. So this first horseshoe, stitch, loop, whatever you want to call it, is 1. Then we've got 2, then we've got 3, then we've got 4, and now number 5 is on the needles. So why don't I count this one here? Remember, when I was knitting this on the other side or purling it on this side, I had to drop the stitch off the needle in this direction to form that purl bump. And I did that working the loop above it. So that is really part of this purl bump row, which means if I was working beyond that, I started this stockinette section on the loop above. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and now 5 is on the needles. Make sense? Sure hope so. Post any questions you have below so that we can get them answered for you. And make sure you come over and join us in our Morehouse Farm Merino flock, our knit-along group, where we concentrate on learning and practicing new techniques to build our knitting toolbox, one skill at a time, one project at a time, with some great camaraderie and support from like-minded knitters. Hope to see you there.